Korea's southern port city of Busan has been included in the list of National Geographic's must-visit destinations in 2023. So what is the universal appeal of Busan? How do you plan a day's visit to get the best of Busan? And what more can be done to enhance the Busan experience? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Busan is a popular travel destination among Koreans, and come next year, the city looks to be sought out by a greater number of foreign travelers, as the southern port city has been tagged by a renowned magazine. Now, for more, I have Thomas Maresca here in the studio. Thomas, it's good to see you again.
Hi, great to be here.
I also have Chris Tharp joining us virtually from Busan. Chris, it's a pleasure.
Nice to be here. Yeah.
Right, Thomas, we'll start here in the studio. Let's begin with a few words on your personal thoughts regarding the port city of Busan, which I understand you've been frequenting quite a bit in recent days.
Yeah, it's really only been within the last few months that I've spent a decent amount of time there. I was there for the film festival. I was there when BTS played, and I was there another time for a story. So I feel like I've only just recently gotten a sense of the place, and you know, I'm a fan of it. I'm glad that the timing of this actually worked out well, because I've really been telling a lot of people how much I enjoyed Busan. And, you know, it just has a very different quality than Seoul, or really, I think, any place else I've been in South Korea. I mean, I think it has more of a wow factor, an immediate sort of, once you're there, that beachfront area, the, you know, Haeundae Beach and Gwangali Beach, and the glittering sort of skyline behind it. There's kind of nothing like that in Seoul. And then, you know, you can sense that there's interesting stuff going on there in terms of food and cafe culture and craft beer, you know, and just there's a lot of natural beauty as well. So it's just kind of like a striking place that has a real unique sense of place, I think. And it's really easy to get to from Seoul as well. Yeah.
Right, it really is.
Yeah.
Chris, Busan was included in the National Geographic's list of top places to visit in the year 2023. Could you tell us a bit about the criteria for this particular selection?
Well, they divided it into several categories, including nature, adventure, family, community, and culture. And Busan ended up placing 2 in the culture section, which I think is great. Now, of course, I'm a regular contributor to National Geographic, but I wasn't privy to the decision-making on this particular article. It just happened to come out at the same time as another article I did on Busan, so it was kind of a double whammy. But I'm not really surprised by it, because with the spotlight we see on South Korea these days because of the Korean wave and K-pop and the movies and things like that, there's been a lot of attention being placed, especially from Western countries, people wanting to visit here. And it only makes sense that Busan would finally kind of emerge out of Seoul's shadow to kind of bask in the limelight of its own. So I'm not surprised it made the list, and I think it's a great inclusion. Yeah.
Right, and staying with that, Thomas, the National Geographic list itself, it actually talked about, and I quote, the creative energy that you experience in Busan. And that being said, what more can you tell us about the film festival that Busan hosts every year, which you covered this year as well?
Yeah, so it's, I think this was the 27th, if I'm not mistaken, and largest film festival in Asia. I think most people would say it's the most important film festival in Asia. And I think it's got a certain quality to it that, you know, is a little bit different than, say, a Cannes or something, in that I think it still has an emphasis on sort of showcasing emerging talents and from around the Asian region. I mean, there's not really like a Palme d'Or type of one winner prize. There's a lot of different categories, but they really focus on emerging talents from the region. And there's a really, you know, a wide variety of films, and it's this year there was 242 films shown from 71 countries. Around 160,000 people came, so it's kind of back to pre-pandemic levels almost. And you know, one other thing, this is sort of a little bit what I focused on this time. It also, the film festival seems open to kind of embracing the emergence of streaming series as a, you know, a legitimate form of art, and they've created a special section that focuses on just premiering streaming shows. So there was a few Netflix premieres, Disney Plus, Paramount Plus by Korean directors, and a couple by others. And you know, so I think there's kind of a flexibility and an openness to the programming as well that also kind of dovetails with the emergence of Korean culture just globally as well.
Right. Chris, like you mentioned earlier, you've written an extensive piece on Busan, and I have to admit there was information that even I wasn't aware of. And that being said, do share with us some of the more exotic dishes that you could taste in Busan, and of course do include your favorite as well.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if it's exotic, but when we talk about Busan, everyone thinks seafood, but the real deep Busan dish is daejigukbap, which is a pork rice soup, which is just about the most savory thing you could ever have. And it's great with kimchi. It's just robust, it's pungent, it's deep. It's one of my favorite things to eat. And it's everywhere in town, so it's hard to find, it's hard to experience bad daejigukbap in Busan because it's just done well everywhere. But there are so many other dishes, like one of my favorite seafood dishes here, and I'm not sure if it's totally specific to Busan, but you see it a lot, especially in the deeper places, is gomjanga, which is hagfish eel. It's a saltwater eel that they skin and they peel and they cut it up and they throw it in your pan with a bunch of gochujang and onions and garlic. And it's great. Like at Chigalchi Market, they have these tiny stalls where you just sit there outdoors with the old lady tending to your gomjanga and under the elements and picking at the eel and maybe washing it down with some soju. It's a really sort of down home experience, and that's one of my favorite things to eat here. And of course there's milmyeon, which is the wheat cold noodles, which is Busan's take on regular naengmyeon, which is made with buckwheat, and things like Dongne pajan, which is like pajan on steroids. It's thick and full of, chunky pieces of squid and seafood. And also, one of my favorite is shia hotdok, of course, which is kind of a pancake that with a melted brown sugar and seeds in the middle. And they serve that at all the main markets in town. And it's especially good in the winter as a real sort of sweet comfort food. So there's so much to eat here that's kind of different than maybe what you'll find in other parts of the country.
Right. Chris, would you recommend daejigukbap to a foreigner who's visiting Busan for the first time as well? Or is it kind of spicy?
Well, yeah, it's a little spicy. It's generally not that spicy. They throw a little gochujang in, and you can add more if you want, but daejigukbap tends to be more savory than spicy. It really agrees with kind of the Western palate because it's full of like meat and garlic, but it's not too strong. It doesn't hit back too much like some Korean food can do. It can be a bit much at first for people who haven't experienced it, but daejigukbap's a very good sort of introduction, and most people like it.
Right, I see. I like that phrase, hitting back, right? There are some dishes that do hit back. And Thomas, now that we've spoken about food, what can you tell us about the places to visit in Busan?
Well, I mean, I think obviously I don't have anywhere near the depth of knowledge of Chris. I mean, some of the places that I liked on my trip, and I think some of them are kind of greatest hits of Busan. I mean, obviously the Haeundae Beach and Gwangali Beach are quite striking, beach city-front locations. I went to Taejongdae Park this last time, which is kind of in the southern tip of the island, which is just like a coastal ocean-front path that you can walk along that goes up a hill, and there's a lighthouse there, and it's really like a striking natural setting and a visual stunning setting. Of course, Gamcheon Culture Village is probably one of the most famous sites there. Just colorful little houses on also like a hilly back alley sort of place with street art, very Instagrammable. I mean, quite popular for tourists. I went to, there's the Sky Observatory on Haeundae Beach, which is that 100-story, just overlook of the whole city with this kind of glittering skyline beneath you. I found that really, worthwhile. One place I wanted to go, I mean, I know there's a lot of historical places there, there's temples and stuff. I wanted to check out, I didn't get a chance to, but I'd like to go next time, is there's a United Nations Memorial Cemetery there, which is, I think, the only of its kind in the world. And there are, soldiers from 21 countries that died during the Korean War, and there's a memorial wall there and some information, and I wanted to get a chance to check that out. But there's, really a lot, I think, to see.
Right, and we do have an annual event, of course, at the UN Veterans Memorial Cemetery in Busan to, of course, commemorate the sacrifices of the fallen soldiers. And so, Chris, aside from the food and places in Busan, what do you suggest is fun activities to do in Busan? Let's say I'm planning a day's trip sometime in December. What would you recommend?
Well, I would probably start in the morning at the north end of the city at Yeonggunsa Temple, which is the temple on the sea. It's kind of perched on this rocky outcropping looking over the surging waves. It's romantic, it's historical. It's really a good place to start. And then make your way towards Haeundae Beach. Maybe go to Cheongsapo and take the Haeundae Sky Capsule or the tourist train around the base of Dalmaji Hill, which offers really good views of the East Sea under the pines of Dalmaji Hill. Of course, you need to, spend some time at Haeundae Beach, maybe have a coffee there. And then I would head to Nampodong, of course, and check out Chigalchi Market, eat there. And you could go to Gamcheon Cultural Village, which is close, but I would probably instead head over to Yeongdo and go to the Hinyol Village, which is this kind of collection of little white and blue and alabaster houses perched over a cliff overlooking the water, and there's a sea walk. You can walk all the way to Taejongdae, actually, which was recommended earlier. And all of these are good. Also, you could go to Songdo Beach, which is right there, and take the cable car to Amnan Park. That's especially great at the nighttime because you get kind of this tapestry of lights, urban spread of the city. And of course, hiking. And after all this, you should check out one of the big spas in town, have a soak your bones, and then get down with some food. Yeah.
Right. Chris, listening to you talk, I can almost imagine myself there in Busan right now. Right. Thomas, is there anything that can be done by Busan authorities to perhaps further enhance visitors' experience while in Busan, do you think?
I think they do a pretty good job of presenting information about, places that are worth going. I think they could probably, there's always room to maybe do more in terms of like a promotional campaigns. There's so much creative talent in Korea. I can imagine there's opportunities just on the kind of the promotional front. But I think a lot, for tourists, people tend to look to, a Nat Geo or information online, user-generated information about things to do and places to go. And I do feel like sometimes that's an area that still is a challenge in some ways in Korea, partly because there's still kind of sort of a closed ecosystem of information. There's so much, not just language-wise, but platforms, Naver, Kakao, like so much information is floating around there, and I often feel still here myself, like I know I'm not privy sometimes to what's really going on in places, and a lot of that information is out in that sort of Korean internet. And I don't know if there's something that the government could do to change that, but maybe as more just international travelers come, that sort of gap will start to be filled a little bit.
Right. Hopefully Chris is listening to you with that, because we understand Chris has been living in Busan for about 18 years now. Chris, I understand this may be a tough question, but what do you suppose are Busan's chances perhaps of hosting the 2030 World Expo? What assets perhaps does it have over its competitors?
Well, that's a tough question, but a good one. I think they're going to announce next year in November, so in 2023. And the competitors are Italy, Rome, and Odessa, Ukraine, and Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. So I think given, like I said before, the spotlight that's been shown onto Korea and the kind of international acclaim and attention the place is getting, I think Busan probably would be the favorite just based on that. Korea's cool right now. As a travel writer who specializes in Korea, I've been getting all sorts of work that, I would have never gotten 6 or 7 years ago because people are suddenly interested in the place. And of course, that makes Busan this great city, which a lot of people had never heard of until recently, because again, it was people could only name Seoul, but now Busan is finally stepping out into its own spotlight. So I think Busan has a great chance of winning. And of course, in Ukraine, there's some instability there. I think there's questions of human rights in Saudi Arabia. And Rome has already seen many days in the sun. So I think it's the perfect time for Busan, a place like Busan, to enjoy such an honor. So if I were a betting man, I'd put my money on Busan, but I'm biased,
Right. Chris, thank you so much for that. All right, then, thank you for your thoughts and your time, Chris. And Thomas here in the studio, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, well, that is all the time we have for this particular edition. For those of you who have yet to come up with a weekend plan, we recommend a trip to Busan. Thank you for watching.